Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello. Welcome, everyone, to episode 243 of the Sample Chapter Podcast. I am Jason A. Meiske, thriller author and host of the show. This and every episode of the show, I might add, because this is my creation. So if this is your first time listening, welcome. Hey, we got a great show for you this week. I had just the absolute best time talking with my guest. He is a paranormal investigator. He is an award-winning author and screenwriter. Had a rock band reach out to him to write music for one of his books. He is the writer of Tales and Wonder. I'm talking about none other than Brian Fitzpatrick. Hey, Brian and I had a fantastic time. Well, I mean, he said he had a good time. I know I had a good time, but I appreciate that he said so. I hope he had as much fun as I did. And I've just been going on and on about the interview and the talk with him ever since, and just having a good time. And you know what? And I gotta say, talking to him really got my own writing juices flowing. Like afterwards, I finished editing the interview, and then I sat down and wrote for over an hour. And edited on Bandit 2, and it was just a blast. I had a really good time. He and I are both '80s kids, so we had a lot of things to talk about off microphone, I guess would be the way to put it. But in the episode, you're going to be hearing all about his background and how Night of the Living Dead got him started down a path towards storytelling. We get to talk a little bit about his adventures in paranormal investigations with his wife. And then we're going to be talking about some of his books, as well as the rock band Chemical Straitjacket, who wrote and released a song for him, and his book Mechcraft. Now, Mechcraft, book 2, is what you're going to be hearing from next week in the episode. For episode 244, so make sure you check that out. It's gonna be so cool, and it has a score that's playing in the background for it, so that's really cool. But during this episode, you're gonna hear how the 80s and 90s movies inspired him, turning screenplays into novels. What is The Matrix meets Harry Potter? We also discuss getting to write your dream project, the importance of networking, turning failure into projects, and he has some really great advice at the end for all you creative people. So make sure you stay tuned throughout the whole thing. It's a fantastic conversation, and I tell you, people, you're gonna love this interview, and it's really great. I can't recommend him highly enough. So, and I'm about to dive into his books. I just finished up another today, so I'm gonna be starting. I think I'm gonna be starting up maybe Mechcraft here pretty quick. As for my writing update, I'm going to hold off on that until next week. I already spoke on it just a little bit. That's all I'm going to do for now. I want to focus more on Brian, but I do invite you to go ahead and check out the affiliate of the show, Writer's Block Coffee. They have 3 amazing flavors of coffee, and you can try one, try them all, or set them up on automatic shipping each month so you don't miss out. Hey, no matter what you do, make sure you use the order code sample chapter at checkout to save 10% on your order. And click that link in the show notes to get right on over to it. I also invite you to check out our podcast friends over at Pop Goes the Culture Network. Link is in the show notes for that as well. That's a network home to about half a dozen or so other shows, all of them fun, all of them wild, and they are all pop culture related. So if pop culture is your game, they have a show for you. All right, everyone. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let's get us on over to the interview with Brian Fitzpatrick. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Hey, I am so excited to bring to you a new to the show author, somebody that I've been having a really good time chatting in the back room here, but I can't wait to introduce him to you. My guest is Brian Fitzpatrick. Brian Fitzpatrick is a best-selling author, producer, screenwriter, builder of words, and a lover of coffee. He began his writer life at the age of 7 after accidentally watching the horror classic Night of the Living Dead. When not writing, Fitzpatrick enjoys giving back with author marketing videos as well as networking at events. And Brian is an experienced public speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Brian Fitzpatrick.
Hey, thanks, Jason, for having me on. Really excited about this.
Hey, Brian, I'm excited too. So much to unpack just in that little bit of a description. I'm thrilled, but let's start first. You're out in California. How you doing with the hurricane?
We did all right. You know, we dodged a bullet. We got a lot of rain, so our reservoirs are filled back up, end of the drought. Unfortunately, the storm cut about 2 hours east of us, so we only got heavy rains. We did not get the worst of it.
Good.
So we will rebuild.
All right, fantastic. Glad to hear it, man. Glad to hear it. I guess that must have come across land now here in Missouri. We've got a little bit of rain. It's not too bad where I am, but like my parents in northern Missouri, they're getting hammered right now.
We send it to you guys.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to the beginning. Night of the Living Dead. What happened that night?
Oh, okay. So I was 7 years old. Mom and I were watching classic horror movies, you know, Dracula, Frankenstein. They're not that scary. I mean, even for 7 years old, I was like, they were good. She dozed off. It gets late at night, and all of a sudden, Night of the Living Dead comes on, and I couldn't look away. I was riveted, and I was terrified, and so I couldn't sleep for about a week afterwards. I just was scared beyond belief, and eventually, I started kind of in my head twisting it that I could be learning that I could be so scared, but also be perfectly safe. And that got me real interested in that idea. And one day my mom suggested I write some scary stories of my own to see what it was like. And I did, and I have not looked back. I've been creating tales of wonder and terror ever since.
Oh my gosh, that's very cool. Yeah, I see you, and we're pretty close to the same age. I remember, of course, the classic Saturday morning cartoons. But
Oh, yeah.
what a lot of people don't talk about is how after the cartoons were over, you had a little bit of some kind of like daytime show, and then they'd have like mid-afternoon horror movies, and it was the classics like that. You'd have, the Wolfman or other monster movies or Godzilla or something like that. I remember
Yeah.
watching The Fly in the middle of the
So much
afternoon.
fun.
Yeah, and so that was a blast. I had a good time with that. Even some of the Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy kind of stuff, and
Oh, those are great.
but I remember for me, it was Return of the Living Dead from 1985.
Yes.
I'd never seen, like, for me, zombies were like James Bond's, what was that, the Roger Moore one? It was Voodoo. That was
Yeah.
zombies for me. And yeah, one night we rented some movies from Blockbuster, and my brother had a friend come over who had also rented movies. And so I had an introduction to heavy metal that night and Return of the Living Dead. And while I really enjoyed heavy metal, Return of the Living Dead totally freaked me out for life, just scarred me because I'm a very positive guy. And to find out that you can't defeat them, that no matter what you do, they're going to keep coming back. And that just horrified me.
And then in that one, they call out to the government for help, and the government solution is to nuke the site.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that's no help at all. That's a downer.
Yeah.
But I loved that one for the comedy aspects of it.
Right.
The zombies had brains, and it was just so hilarious. It was gory, super gory and scary, but the fact that they had the comedy element in there really made me like that movie a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. My wife pulled one over on me about 15 years ago. She found a DVD copy of it, and she like sets up a nice at-home date night. We're gonna relax and watch movies. She says, "Oh, I got this new movie. We'll check it out." I said, "What is it?" "Oh, it's a surprise." Yeah, that's what it was. And
Surprise.
yeah, here I am. I mean, at that time, like 35, closer to 40, and I'm still sitting down with my knees pulled up, going, "Oh," like I'm
It
trying.
still freaked you out.
It still freaked me out a little bit. I was like, okay, it's not as bad as it was, like, but this is better. But then again, some weeks before then, I had watched, oh my gosh, what was it? the zombie movie that takes place in an apartment. It's a remake of Wreck. I forget what it was called.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
shoot.
the building gets completely locked down, and everybody
Like
inside
it's
is
like the American version was like Quarantine, I think it was called.
yeah, quarantine. That's it.
Same idea, yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
That was
Yeah.
pretty cool because it was an attempt to use the found footage style,
Hmm.
which I hate. I hate the jiggly cam of that, but I loved the first person intensity of it. Like she's turning the camera, all of a sudden there's a zombie in her face.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's intense.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, after seeing that, Return of the Living Dead wasn't so bad. I think it was just my childhood trauma coming back. I was trying to face it down. So my wife had a
Yeah,
good laugh that night.
but you conquered your demons.
Yes, yes. I haven't watched it since, but yeah, I've
Yeah.
conquered it.
So yeah, so for me, yeah, Night of the Living Dead holds like kind of a special place in my heart because of it. I do give it credit for being the catalyst to start me on this career path. Way back at 7 years old, it was nuts.
Yeah, and I mean, and you like use that with your writing, with your books, the screenwriting, and I mean, you even do some paranormal investigations. I understand.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. We need to get into, but I was going to add that I was fortunate enough to grow up in my preteen and teen years during the sort of heyday of the '80s
Mm,
movies of Spielberg, George Lucas, and even the horror movies of David Cronenberg and the books of Clive Barker and Stephen King. All that stuff, sort of mid '80s to '90s, just was sort of big on the scene, and that really influenced how I write things. And I love big action stuff. I love big suspense and
oh
big
yeah.
scares. I
Oh
just love
yeah.
those things. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah. Oh, so the paranormal investigation. I don't know why, but my wife and I both have always been fascinated by what happens after we die. I mean, there's religious aspects of it. There's the non-religious aspects that there's nothing, but then there's something. And we got into it because we were curious. And at the time, we didn't know you could actually do that as a hobby or anything. But then, way back in the early 2000s, the show Ghost Hunters came on. Those were the very first
Mm,
guys to do it. Those were the two guys who worked for Roto-Rooter. Then on the side, they would do these ghost hunts with their little team,
hmm.
and it was a realistic approach. They weren't theatrical, no big scares. They were just like sometimes they found stuff and sometimes they didn't. And it was really nice to have a realistic look at it. And so that got us on the path. And so for 17 years, my wife and I have been going out on different paranormal investigations with various teams. And we have a really good team right now. And we love doing the major places, and we all love doing people's homes that need help.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. Now, does
And
how much does that play into your writing?
ironically, zero right now. I have not written a single ghost related story ever in my life. And you'd think I would be constantly writing about ghosts, but I think it has become so commonplace
Hmm.
now that I don't feel it's scary. Like it's never scary. It's mostly, 4 to 5 people sitting in a dark room talking to the air. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you'll get a knock, or sometimes you'll get a voice, and sometimes you'll get an apparition, but it's just never scary. So it's hard for me to put my mind into a sense of writing it as a terrifying tale, because the realistic of it is just not.
Okay. All right. Do you have a moment where something was pretty creepy?
Oh, we've had several really cool incidences. We go in with a skeptical mind. Anytime something happens that could be paranormal, we do our best to debunk it. We check temperatures, and we sort of stomp around to see if something, movement causes the technology to go off, or maybe a breeze. We always try and debunk it. So when we can't, and it remains unexplained, then we get excited. Um, there's a ship, an old ship from the 1800s, docked in the San Diego harbor called the Star of India, and a couple of the ghost shows have done investigations there. But what a lot of people don't know is that they actually sometimes will rent out an overnight for people to come on and do paranormal investigations.
Oh
And
wow.
it's amazing. You pay your money, you get on there, and the security locks you on board because they don't want, passersby just to wander on. So you are on the ship alone, you and your team, no guide, no security, no nothing. You just get run of the ship and to do an investigation for the whole night. And we've gotten that one's so reliable. We always get something. Oftentimes, boot steps walking like right in front of you, but there's nobody in front of you. Temperature changes when you ask it. You ask if there's a spirit here, can you lower the temperature? And then it lowers it on command. It raises it on command. We'll hear strange knocks, like something fell over, and we just a lot of really interesting stuff. Never anything negative though.
Okay, well I guess that's refreshing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, I've had a few things that just I can't explain other than that, maybe there was something supernatural, but at the same time, I've never felt dread or that this isn't right kind of a thing.
Right.
It's been actually a little peaceful.
That's good. I mean, and if that's the case, if it was paranormal, it possibly could have been a relative checking in. I know our experience has been, I've never encountered anything, like some of these shows get all theatrical and like, oh, it's a demon or oh, it's evil. I've never felt that. I keep in mind it's just people, and maybe they're scared, or maybe they're happy, maybe they're frustrated, but they're just people. That's been my experience in the 17 years.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it was terrifying, I probably wouldn't do it anymore.
That's a good point. Oh my goodness. So, all right. So we were discussing before about your inspiration with the Night of the Living Dead, and then all the amazing directors and producers of the 80s. And I'm right there with you. That has growing up in the 80s, that has just informed my writing to just no end at this point. What do you think is your most direct connection, something that you've written that really like goes back to, this is totally my 80s connection, my vibe with what I grew up with?
Oh, I'd say it would have to be my current science fiction trilogy. It's called Metcraft, and that's Mechcraft, like witchcraft, but with mech in the front part. And this, because the central characters are teenagers themselves, it harkens back to those, Goonies and those other movies where the teenagers were the central focus. But what I loved about the 80s movies is that they didn't talk down to the kids. They didn't talk down to the teenagers. They were the heroes, and they had to think their way out of it with no help from the adults. And this book, this story, Metcraft, really hones in on that. It's a story about sentient nanotechnology embedded in the DNA of some people. Our main character, Jake, he is a teenager who this Metcraft, this nanotechnology activates in his body, and he never knew he had it. And he's the first ever person born with this nanotechnology in his system because both his parents have it. And the way the original people got it was through science experiments, thanks to the government. And the stage is set where when the scientists who originally discovered the nanotechnology, they all injected themselves, and they all had these powers, like they can actually connect mentally with the nanotechnology and bring it out of their skin as liquid metal. So think of like Terminator 2, the way the liquid metal Terminator would come out. Think of that coming out of a person's skin and forming any sort of tool, weapon, device, anything that the person has the mental ability to create. And so the scientists could not agree on the best use of it, and it descended into an actual warfare between the scientists. And so now, fast forward to our time, we've got 3 factions vying for control of what to do with this technology. And then enter Jake, the main character, who was born with it. Now, all the other Metcrafters, they know the rules. They all have limitations. They all know what each other's, pluses and minuses are, because it's been established. And there's sort of tenuous stalemate happening in Los Angeles. And along comes Jake, and because he's the first ever born with the nanotechnology, he is a wild card. All the different factions believe he will be able to do things with his power that nobody else has been able to do, and therefore they think he can turn the tide of the war to their side. And so this becomes a wraith to a safe house for Jake and two teenager Met crafters who are assigned to escort him. And it becomes a race and time to get to the safe house and see if his parents are alive or dead, and also to evade the one faction called Hunters, who think that Met crafters are an abomination and should be killed and they should all be destroyed, including themselves, once it's done. So this suicide cult is led by a fanatical cult leader named Sasha, and she is the villain of all villains. I love her to death. She thinks she's the hero of the story, and she wants to possess Jake and make him do her bidding to end the war and kill all Met crafters. So that's my 80. That's my opus to the 80s.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome though. Yeah,
it's filled with it's a ton of action because I wrote it as a screenplay initially. So it's got, it was 120 pages of pure Matrix level adrenaline action, and I decided to convert it to a novel and try and build a nice healthy fan base with it there to try and get the movies or TV shows made.
Okay.
So that's been the goal. So when people read it, it's a very fast, exciting, pulse pounding read.
Oh man.
One of my early reviews actually coined the term, and I latched onto it because I thought it was so great that they said this. They said it's The Matrix meets Harry Potter. And I was awesome. Like, yes, I'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah, what a great nod.
So I was very happy with that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's got it definitely. They're just hearing you describe it. It's got a very 80s vibe to it, that feel to the story, and it's like I can picture that in my mind with like some of that 80s technology trying to like if they were doing that today, or excuse me, doing that in the 80s, trying to film something like that, I could see some of the effects and the real effects with it and everything. That's pretty cool. I wonder how they would do the LMG, the liquid metal guy, prior to that. So that's kind of cool though.
Yeah, no, it's kind of cool because the villain has resonated more than anything else in any of like more than the heroes. People really seem to like her. In fact, in 2021, I had a rock band from New Jersey reach out to me and say, "Hey, we loved your book so much. We want to write a song. Do we have your permission?" And I'm like, "Well, how many writers get songs about their book unless you're Lord of the Rings?" But
right.
I, of course, said yes. And so we worked along the way, and they wrote this song. It turned out to be just about the villain, Sasha. And the song is called Tendril and Blade. And it ended up being released on one of their albums about a year ago. I was completely blown away. They actually had their producer for the album is the keyboard player for Ministry.
Okay.
So they had some pretty heavy hitters on this, and it was kind of cool to watch the process, and they included me on everything. So I kind of got to hear how it was, the lyrics they came up with and the music they were forming, and it's very cool. So that was an honor. That was a great honor. I was very humbled and felt very privileged to have that done.
Yeah, and you have that on your website, right?
Yeah, people can scroll down the site and click on it to hear the song.
That is super cool, man. And that was what is that rock band's name?
Oh, the band is called Chemical Straitjacket, and they remove all the vowels, so it's like CHMCL, and then Straitjacket has the number 8 in it. It's I'm like, why did you guys do that? And they said, I think they told me there was some other band that had a similar name and they wanted to stand out. I was like, oh, okay.
that
but
first
it worked.
Part, that first part, I couldn't make sense of that, but now it does make sense. The chemical.
Yeah.
I figured out the straitjacket. It was like, okay, there we go. So that's awesome.
Yeah, they're great guys though. Their music's really cool. It's kind of industrial rock. It's very loud and crunchy and got some cool, clever. He's a good lyricist. He has clever lyrics. I like it.
Very, very cool, man. And so now, like you said, you wrote this originally as a screenplay, turned it into a novel, but you also still do screenplays, and you got some really cool things coming up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, my first love was screenwriting. I mean, I did start off with short stories as a kid and wrote a novel that I hated and converted it to a screenplay and loved it. So I've been sort of screenplays ever since. And thanks to social media, I've been getting writing gigs the last 2-3 years in the screenwriting world. It's and anybody who's tried it knows it's a super hard area to break into. Breaking into Hollywood is next to impossible, and there's no clear-cut pathway to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate enough to make a couple connections in a couple Facebook groups and on LinkedIn, and I got hired the first time from actress and producer Gina Nemo. She was one of the stars of the original 21 Jump Street back in the day.
Yeah.
And she's super go-getter. When she sets her mind on something, she gets it done. So she hired me to write a science fiction TV pilot based on an idea she had. And so we co-wrote that together, and we loved working together so much. And she's currently shopping that around, once the strike is over, to try and get this show called Finch and Skull made into a TV show. It's kind of a combination of Mad Max meets Game of Thrones, if you can put your head around that.
Okay.
It's going to be out there. But a year later, she hired me again to write a science fiction feature that she already had the dates to film it. She already had the director. She already had the cast, and she had the location, but she didn't have a script. She and the director threw out the script they were going to use and decided to make a science fiction movie instead. So she approached me. It was like last February. And she's like, "Hey, Brian, can you write a science fiction feature for me and have it ready to be shot in May?" And I'm like, "Wait a second." I mean, because usually a screenplay will go through about 20 rewrites before it gets to the set, before it's ready to film. They go through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "I'll try." So she gave me her notes on what the ideas that she had. And I got to work. And it was great because unfortunately, she needed it early because she wanted her cast to start memorizing the lines. And so I had to get it done even sooner than May. So I got it done. I managed to get 3 rewrites in, and then she needed it. So I'm like, "Oh, okay," and I handed it over to her nervously. "Here you go." And she ended up liking it, and she showed it to the director, and they said, "Okay, we definitely want to keep working on this, but we're under a very tight timeline." So they hired me to come to the set as script supervisor, so I could help do rewrites on the fly and make sure continuity is there on set. And it was a unique opportunity because I've never been on set before, and but I knew what the job entailed, so I said yes, absolutely. So we did that, and it ended up being really cool. It's a sort of a Blade Runner meets Twilight Zone kind of near future apocalyptic thing, but it's set in a single location because this is an independent movie, low budget. Yeah, that was the funny thing too. She told me, "Okay, Brian, this story's got to be this, but there's no money for choreographed fight scenes, and there's no money for special effects." And so I'm like, "Wait, you want me to write a science fiction story with no special effects and no fight scenes?" She says, "Yes." So I was like, "Oh my God." So that's when I said, "Who else has done that? How has that been done before?" And so my thought was exactly Twilight Zone. They almost never had special effects or big fight scenes, but they were still riveting and sometimes scary and always trippy. So I kind of harnessed my inner Twilight Zone and created something I think is pretty cool. They all loved it, and we filmed it last May. And so now it's in post-production, and we're hoping for a release of this movie this year in 2023. It's called The Simian Trials.
That's
And
awesome, man.
it was a blast. Filming it was insanely cool. We had this actor. He's usually in action movies, but we wanted him for one day to play a short role, and they brought him up. And we filmed this in Ojai. We got him to drive up from LA, and he was going to work for like half a day. And he had just got back from filming like 3 weeks in Thailand. So this guy, picture this huge 6'5" dude with a beard, big old barrel chested, huge guy with a booming voice. He comes walking in. The first thing he says in his loud voice, "I've been in Thailand for 3 weeks. Who's got weed?" And sure enough, like 4 crew members raised their hand. So it was he was great. The whole filming of it was great.
Oh my gosh.
It
And
was
do you think
high.
you think that'll be is it gonna be like streaming somewhere or coming out on DVD?
Gina is debating between doing the festival circuit where you hope to collect wins and then get a big distribution deal in theaters, or going right to streaming. She has connections. I mean, she's been around a long time. She can get done whatever she wants done. So it's just going to depend on what she thinks is the best path. Her other indie films have all gathered a lot of awards. So I'm thinking she's going to go that way, because that's, if she gets a distribution deal out of that, that's free.
Yeah.
It costs her nothing and earns her more money. So this one, I think, it's definitely the biggest movie as far as scope and potential that she has. So I think we're going to go distribution on that. So hopefully it'll be in theaters. I hope.
That'd be awesome, man. That would be really, really cool. I hope it does. And I can't wait to see it.
Thanks. And even streaming, I'll be happy with. I'll just be happy to have something made that I wrote, and see I got the IMDb credits already, but seeing your name, something about, for a writer, seeing your name on the screen, there's going to be something powerful about that.
There you go. Perfect. Well, I mean, oh my gosh, there's just so much to dive into, so much to follow up on. What do you got? What do you got coming up next? Like, do you have more of the Metcraft series, or what's next for you?
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, here's some funny stuff. So my publisher, when they finished the third book and they released it, they said, "So Brian, do you have more Metcraft coming?" And I was like, "No, I'm the trilogy, and I'm done. I want to move on." And so when I hung up from that call, my mind immediately went to, well, you could do this, and all of a sudden I outlined 3 more books out of that. So now I called him back, said, "Yeah, I'm going to do some more." I can't get away from these characters. I love them so much. That's in the works. Also, I just finished another writing gig where I adapted a popular YA fantasy novel into a TV pilot script. I'm still under an NDA on that. I can't say what book it is, but it's a new and very popular book, and I was lucky to land this gig where I got to write the TV pilot adaptation. Just finished that, and my current work in progress is, this is like a dream come true, because I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I have now been commissioned to write a novel set in a Dungeons and Dragons massive campaign that just crowdfunded.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's an epic fantasy. I'm going old school, like just big adventure set in this campaign world that this company called Storytellers Forge, working with D&D, they created it. It's called the Black Ballad, and it's basically the adventure takes place after the characters die. So when the party gets killed, they end up in this place called the Sunless Crossing, which is the afterlife, and it's a whole world there with politics and monsters and all kinds of cool. They've created an amazing 300-page plus campaign for people to play, and to coincide with it, they're asking various authors to write books set in that world, not in the story that they created, but their own stories set in that world. So I'm a couple thousand words into my story for Black Ballad.
That's awesome, man.
the game just the crowdfunding, they wanted $26,000 to get this campaign launched. They ended up with $154,000. So it's massively popular.
There you go.
And they're going to tie it all in. The game is going to launch, I think they said January, and then at that time they're going to begin crowdfunding to get several novels in that world launched. So my deadline is like December to turn this in.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I talked to a lot of authors, and I can relate to all of them in that it feels like a lot of time we're just going where the muse leads us. But I think we all have that special project that we'd love to write one day, and it's refreshing to hear that it sounds like you're getting to follow that dream, right? Something that it's like, oh yes, the Dungeons and Dragons, that you get to do that. It sounds like you'll live the dream, man.
And it all happens because I'm gonna just flat out tell you, it happens because of networking, of building relationships with people that I never would have met if I hadn't really been on social media and pursued in-person events and just talking to people. And a lot of people kind of get afraid of the word networking, like it seems so superficial, but I look at it as I'm building genuine relationships, I'm making new friends, and it's really been successful. It's been a great way to get a career going. So the Dungeons and Dragons thing just sort of fell into my lap.
I would agree with that. I didn't get to attend Kansas City Comic-Con last year, but the year before that, I got to go, and it was one of those things I hadn't really prepared myself for what might happen. I'd been for a couple of years, talked to a lot of the authors there. So when I went that time, and then I missed a year. So then the year that I went and I took my family with me, I was not expecting so many of the authors to be calling out to me. And I had my family where they all wore sample chapter t-shirts for me
Oh
to help
yeah,
promote it. And so,
smart.
yeah, and they said they kept getting pulled aside, like, "Hey, are you with Jason?" And they were like trying to reach out to me, and it's like I was really surprised, like how many people were aware of the show, and just the same thing, networking and knowing. And yeah, I talked to that author last year. They were on the show. They were in episode 101 or whatever, and different things like that. And it's amazing how
It's
that grows.
yeah, and it's so cool because then of course those authors will talk about the great time they had or link to the interview, and then you'll get more people saying, "Hey, I want to be on the show too," and it just escalates from there. You never know who's going to reach out to you. It's
Exactly.
incredible. I had someone on Twitter quoted about 6 months ago about what success in the arts, well, particularly writing in this case, but in the arts, he says it comes down to three things: hard work, luck, and the actions of others. I'm like, whoa, because
Wow.
it's the actions of others. Here we are,
Yeah.
and it's people helping each other is what I translate that to, and it's so true.
It is. It is. Yeah. And I mean, that was the whole idea behind whenever I had the idea to do the show. It's like, well, I want to do what I can to help out other authors, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And so,
There you go.
let's try and do this thing together, and just have a good time along the way.
And that is one of my favorite all-time quotes as well. A rising tide lifts all boats. It's because
Hmm.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. We all need each other, and whenever we can help each other, it's fantastic. I used to give. I haven't been able to do it in a couple of years, but I used to do a workshop on for new writers wanting to publish for the first time, and so I really said, "Hey, I screwed up a lot. Here's what not to do." and I would, and the thing started off being 2 hours, but it grew to 3 hours of just round table. I did some lecturing, but then I encouraged a lot of involvement with the people in the crowd, just and let's workshop this. And
Mhm.
I learned quite a bit, actually, hearing people's ideas and writing them down. And so together we came up with this, a methodology saying, look, this is things to avoid and things you can pursue and think outside the box. And I love doing that workshop. I might actually start doing that again. I really enjoyed it.
Well, and that's a great way to turn it around too, to take, here's all these failures, and then turn that around into something positive by like, hey, take my lessons of what not to
Yeah,
do.
exactly. See all this here? Don't do this.
There you go. That sounds like a best-selling book to me.
Right. Oh, speaking of the D&D book, that led to, here we go again with the help with the efforts of others. It led to another thing with that same company, Storytellers Forge. They read and loved the Metcraft series, and they said, Brian, if there was ever a story that needed to be a role-playing game, Metcraft is it. So they have invited me to create the Metcraft tabletop role-playing game.
Oh,
And
wow.
that'll be the next project I work on after I finish the book. They've given me carte blanche. They said, we have in-house game designers, we have in-house artists, in-house editors. You can utilize them as much or as little as you want, and the game will be completely mine. I will have total creative control, and they're going to launch it with a crowdfunding campaign just like they did Black Ballad. And so I am completely pumped because I've always wanted Metcraft to be either a video game or a role-playing game. And so now that big dream is going to come true.
That is so awesome, man.
Isn't
Oh
that
my
crazy?
gosh. That's crazy cool.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. Didn't know of any kind of path forward to get that accomplished. And here it showed up.
Yep. Persistence, man. Just
Yeah.
keeping the nose to the grindstone and keep plugging away, and that hard work starts to pay off.
And that's sort of a mantra that I kind of keep to keep in my mind all the time when I'm writing or trying to market is hope and perseverance.
Mhm.
Those two things together. Never give up. Always keep going. And I tell people, you know, if they get discouraged or if they get some bad news or they don't win the contest or whatever it is that's going on that sort of kicks them when they're down, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to lick your wounds, but I tell them just don't give up on a permanent basis. You know, take a break and then come back to it and you'll be happy you did.
There you go. And I'm gonna stop things right there because that is a great way to end the show. That is fantastic and great advice for everybody out there listening.
Oh,
Brian,
excellent.
Brian, where can people find and follow you?
I am all over social media. I'm literally on every platform I can think of. I love to engage. I've got on Facebook, I've got an author page there. Twitter, I'm all over Twitter as author Brian Fitzpatrick. I'm on Instagram as author Brian Fitzpatrick. TikTok, LinkedIn, you can always find me there. There's also on my website, there is an easy link tree. If you go to the link tree link, that has all of my socials. You can always find me there. And I encourage people to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about writing or talk about gaming or science fiction or horror, whatever. I love to engage and I love to help.
And you've been incredible to talk to, man. I feel like I could be sitting here for the next 6 or 7 hours just talking with you. And I mean, we haven't even dove into really like the 80s stuff or other things that we probably would talk if we weren't on the show.
I know we could go on forever.
We'd be totally geeking out.
Give me some coffee and we'll go.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is that'll be it for this week. But make sure you tune in next week. You're going to hear one heck of a reading from Brian and book 2 of his Metcraft collection. It's all I can say is it's a heck of a reading. You're going to love it. So tune in next week for that. But until then, take care.
Thank you, Jason.